What if thought leaders from around the university came together to discuss state-of-the-art remedies to 21st century challenges? Florida Atlantic University's faculty are pioneering education through cutting-edge solutions such as artificial intelligence, authentic assessment, and active learning. Join us as our faculty forge new paths to the future of higher education. From the Center for Online and Continuing Education, this is Faculty Lounge Live.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Faculty Lounge Live. My name is Shannon Deere and I am the Quality Assurance Coordinator for the Center for Online and Continuing Education here at FAU. I am thrilled today to be joined by Dr. Donna Marion, Senior Instructor in the Department of Psychology and expert teacher for the College of Science. Dr. Marion received eLearning certification for teaching online back in 2013 and since then has taught over 125 sections at FAU across multiple courses in both online and face-to-face formats. She is an avid consumer of anything related to AI large language models and is a member of the University AI Policy Task Force. In 2024, Dr. Marion received FAU's Award for Excellence and Innovation in Undergraduate Teaching. Dr. Marion, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to start by asking you to tell us kind of why you think introducing AI is so important, in introducing it in the classroom.
Let me go back to my initial motivation. After that November 30th, 2022 OpenAI announcement on ChatGPT, I came back in that spring 2023 semester excited and a little bit apprehensive about what that was going to do to us in higher education. I thought about it all semester long, hadn't exactly embraced it yet. But because I teach 4 different classes, I get to know some of my students because I have them in repeated classes. And I do discussion forums in some large online classes and was being told by my students that their chat groups were blowing up and that a few students were talking about this new technology that would write their discussion posts for them. So by this time the spring semester ended, it became very obvious to me that students were going to use the technology. I didn't want to be a police officer. I didn't want to have to police whether they were using it or not. So I started embracing the notion of let's have students use it. Let's teach them how to use it critically and responsibly. But even more important than that, AI is going to be used. I mean, what have we seen over the past, almost 2 years now? It's being used out in the workforce, and more employers are looking for employees who know how to use that technology because they want to put it to work for them. So we wouldn't be doing right by our students. We'd be doing them a disservice if we didn't try to introduce them to AI.
Wonderful. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you are currently using AI in your classes?
Well, I teach 4 different courses each semester. I teach 2 large online courses that are asynchronous, so there's no student contact live at all outside of one-on-one meetings that are scheduled with a student in Zoom. And those are social psychology and psychology of women. Then I also teach a smaller social behavior lab class, and I also teach statistics both on the undergraduate and graduate level. So I've thought a lot about how I can incorporate AI into all of those. Where I am so far as I've incorporated them, I repurposed my discussion forums, which I've always had students do in those distance learning courses because they can learn content while they're gaining a sense of community because they're talking with each other in those discussion forums. So I thought about repurposing them to have students make, first of all, watch, like in Psychology of Women, for example, they watch a video, and in that very first assignment, the video is on how women are treated in the media, and then they're supposed to go out to ChatGPT and use ChatGPT to tell them why a certain television show or book or movie might mistreat women in the media and perpetuate negative stereotypes. And I want that first post to be totally ChatGPT. The nice thing about using ChatGPT is that you can also share the ChatGPT conversation. So I ask students in the reference, because they're learning how to reference their source also, the ChatGPT conversation, and provide an operable link to that conversation so classmates can see exactly what prompts were used to get the output, which made up their first post. But then they have to respond, they have to do two responses, one to their own ChatGPT output, and talk about, okay, now how does that affect the psychology of women, and what do we know about that in the literature? So they have to go out and find a peer-reviewed scientific journal article that supports the psychological effects of that media on women and properly discuss it, introduce it, cite it, and reference it. And then their second post is they have to do the same thing with the classmates' post, which was on a different topic. So they're getting a lot of information in the process.
When you introduce it to students, what does that look like? What does that kind of initial introduction of generative AI look like?
It's very lengthy instructions, and those are really critical, particularly if you're in a distance learning course and you're not in front of the student. So I have a really dense page or two of instructions on what's expected in each step of the process. And within those 2 pages, there are links to other instructions because students are coming in at different levels, right? So some students don't even know how to get a ChatGPT account. So there's a link to instructions on how to set that up. There is a link to how do I find a scientific journal article. There's a link to how do I cite and reference a scientific journal article. There's a link to the grading rubric that will grade their posts in the discussion forum. And there's a link to example posts that would earn full credit. So, and that's what's really, really critical in an assignment like that, is that you set the structure for exactly what's expected and where within the assignment ChatGPT or AI is required and where it's not authorized.
It sounds like you are not only being very clear in your instructions to students, which I think is great and key, but also you're listening to your students from the time when they first started saying, you know, we found out about this new tool. So what has the feedback been from students? What are they saying about these assignments? What's their experience been like?
Well, it's mixed. Some students don't like assessments that make them work, and there's no question that this one makes students work. But overall, it's been excitement by the students. They've embraced the assessment. And I know because at the end of each semester, I have students contribute their final thoughts to a discussion forum. So I know we have that in spot comments, right? Students' perception of teaching. But in this forum, students post so that everybody can see their comments, their thoughts, what could be improved about the course, okay, what they loved about the course. And then they interact with each other. Okay, talk back and forth. Well, but I loved that point that you don't like. In those final thoughts discussion forums, students, for the most part, are raving about the opportunity to learn it and the fact that we've embraced it, say that they learned not only about critical and responsible use of AI, but it also, because they were so engaged, helped them learn the ultimate content of the subject matter, which is what I was really trying to teach them.
That's great. So let's talk about potential unauthorized use. How do you try to ensure that students are only using generative AI in authorized ways, in ways that you're comfortable with?
The bottom line is that you can't be 100% certain that students aren't using it in areas where it's not authorized. But you need to pay attention, and I'm very lucky because these are large distance learning courses. I get help for additional TA support from COCE for those large online courses. So the TAs are paying close attention to what the students post, and they're looking for anybody who might be using AI when it's not authorized, and we're taking steps to prevent it when we do see it from happening. But so instructions are important too, making sure that students understand what they need to do, and they then know that you're looking. But also the design of the assignment, like in my discussion forum assignments, they might be using unauthorized AI to ideate and do some of the writing for them in the response posts. but that doesn't keep them from finding a journal article because I require that they attach the full PDF of the journal article that they used. You take steps like that in the process so that even if students are relying heavily on AI where they shouldn't be, they're still being engaged in the assignment in a way that's creating learning.
When you think about kind of looking ahead, what are some other ways that you're thinking about potentially introducing AI into your courses? What's next for you?
Well, I've actually, thinking out loud a little bit, been thinking about incorporating it, believe it or not, into my stats class. And again, AI is not for every course. And up until recently, I thought it just doesn't fit in a statistics class where you're teaching students how to do manual computations of statistical tests like t-tests and ANOVA. But I'm rethinking that, and I'm thinking maybe I should, as an extra credit assignment, have a student think up a possible research question, like, are boys smarter than girls? And students are going to come up with better questions than that, of course, but for discussion purposes, are girls smarter than boys? So what would you do to test that? You would do an independent samples t-test. And so I'd ask the students to come up with just a little bit of data, okay? 10 scores for boys who had an IQ test and 10 scores for girls who had an IQ test. Feed that to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to show the hand computations for that test. And then check it. And did they come up with the right answer? And then work the problem out themselves in the specific way I have them do it in class, which is not the way that ChatGPT is going to produce that information, and do a compare. And they have to turn in all of that. I'm even toying with saying, okay, now you've got the results, ChatGPT, write the results up in APA format. And based on my experience with ChatGPT, I know there's going to be errors there. So I think that there's ways that it can even be incorporated in that type of math class. I would love, in my other face-to-face class, it's a lab and the same kind of opportunities aren't there, but we chatted a little bit before our session started about how I would love to be using it in an online class, if in a face-to-face class, when students ask a question, let's see what ChatGPT or Copilot says about that. Let's ask them and pull up the answer on the screen for everybody in the class to see, so they see how the question was asked, the response of ChatGPT or Copilot, and then have students comment. Is this an appropriate response? Where is it strong? Where is it weak? Is it wrong in any way? Did it answer the initial question? And I think that way, it takes minimal time, but it's introducing the concept of using AI for ideation to answer questions critically and responsibly by looking at the output and determining potential ways that it's wrong and ways in which it's strong.
So many possibilities. Generative AI in statistics. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. So exciting. Let's talk about faculty. So when you talk to other faculty members, do you have recommendations, advice for people who are considering incorporating AI into their classrooms?
The advice for people using it and not yet using it would be a little bit different. If they're already using it, I would say, first of all, instructions on how you want it to be used. First of all, in the syllabus, be very, very clear where it's authorized and where it's not. Then supplementary instructions for each assessment that's very, very detailed on what students should be doing in each step of the process is also critical, so that the students feel supported in the process. And then if we're talking a little bit about professors, instructors who aren't using it, particularly those who are saying no way, I would say rethink that. Because again, we need to prepare our students for what they're going to see out there in the workforce. We're not putting this genie back in the bottle. It is here to stay. They need to understand how to use it critically and responsibly. They need to understand when it's used, that they need to disclose the use, and how do they do that with proper cites and references. But if you're in the camp still, okay, that I'm not going to rethink it, then I say to those educators, then just be very careful that you don't need to rethink your assessments, particularly if you're doing writing assessments and you're saying absolutely no use of AI, because you will have some students that are going to use it. Another place I would go with that, so just to back up to that last point, so I mean, maybe instead of written assignments, you do oral presentations, you do oral examinations. Those assignments need to be rethought. There was one other point that was coming. Oh, when you say, if you say no AI whatsoever in your syllabus, is that really what you mean? Because it's everywhere. I mean, it's in word correction, it's in Grammarly, it's embedded in so many other programs that we use. It's there. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. We have many students in this melting pot, particularly in South Florida, where students have English as a second language, and they're working really hard to perfect their writing skills, and some even their speaking skills. In regard to writing skills, do we want to say it absolutely cannot be used and risk not enabling them to take those brilliant thoughts that are on the inside and getting them out on paper? So there's so many reasons that we should be rethinking. Maybe that strict policy against AI isn't such a good thing.
I think you really nailed it when you said, we have a responsibility to our students to kind of ensure that we are preparing them, right? So I think just to kind of, I think I'd like to end focusing back on our students. What do you say to your students? What are your general recommendations to them, or how do you talk to them about, again, why you think it's so critical to use AI? What do you say to your students about using AI, maybe in general?
Well, a couple of things, and this goes back to the educators too, because their assignments need to be created this way. But students need to learn how to use AI critically. It is here to stay, but you can't let AI be your critical thinker. Okay, you need to be the pilot. AI is your co-pilot. So, and AI is wrong. It's more frequently right, but it does put out bad information. So you have to use AI critically. If we're talking about within the classroom, I would tell students to be very careful to understand where AI use is authorized and where it's not authorized. And if there's any question whatsoever as to whether it is or isn't authorized, ask. I would say if your classes aren't supporting AI use within the classroom, be inquisitive outside of the classroom, because again, it's here to stay, and you will need it in the future. So build those muscles on your own, and when you can, with the help of your educators.
Absolutely. So it looks like we have a question.
Yes, this question is for Dr. Marion. How do you see AI evolving in education over the next few years?
I think we're going to see it more and more. I think there's going to. I mean, I was an early adopter. I embraced it pretty quickly. I think we're going to see a lot of people a lot of educators who don't currently endorse it, endorsing it. I mean, we have a lot of programs here at FAU where we're helping educators learn how to use it. So to that extent, I would put in a plug for our FAU AI website, and particularly our FAU Playground, because there's lots of information there for educators and for students everything from simple glossaries on what terms mean to general courses on how do I get started with Copilot to more advanced self-training programs. So I think it's going to continue to grow. I think that more and more will embrace it. And I'm still really, really excited about what we're going to see.
Yeah, just to go back to something we were talking about before we were live, when you first started using AI in your classes, it sounded like, you were not, there weren't a ton of people who were doing that, right? But you think about how much has changed since that time, right? When you came back in early 2023 and you decided to do this, if you just think about how much has changed and how many people have embraced it in that amount of time, you can only imagine.
In the spring of 2023, when I first started talking about actually using it in the classroom, my colleagues thought I was nuts. And I got to say, in going into summer, when I first put this to work in the first course where I implemented it, I felt like I was on top of it. I felt like I knew what was going on, but so many competitors have entered the market. Companies have rebranded. There's hundreds and hundreds of AI resources out there that are readily available. There's announcements daily. I mean, we first started with OpenAI and ChatGPT, and then there were AI detection devices, and then there were devices that detected AI detection and took AI speak and turned it back into human speak. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's exploded outside of large language models also in the areas of imaging. So that's definitely a challenge because things are changing daily. I no longer feel, I still read, I'm still an avid reader of all kinds of AI announcements, but I no longer feel on top of anything. So I think we have to take that slow rather than running through that door and embracing everything, because some programs are more safe to use. Remember, one of our obligations as educators is to protect our students' privacy, so we have to be very careful what programs we're using and how we're using them, particularly with regard to sensitive student information. Mm-hmm. But I think another thing that I like how the AI playground is out there and how educators are being encouraged to explore through these structured ways that you present. One of the things that helped me too become an early adopter is I started using it very early for my own workload. I use it to ideate all the time. I don't use it to write. I have used it for an outline. It helps me brainstorm. I've tried using it to create PowerPoint presentations. I'm a really picky person on my PowerPoints because I do a lot of programming, a lot of animation. So I haven't been terribly successful there, but I know people who have used it to actually create PowerPoints from content for them, and it's worked well for them. I use it, it's called AI Companion, I think, in Zoom. I love hosting a meeting because when I host a meeting, I can get AI summaries of what that meeting was all about. It even comes up with to-do lists, and it's amazing. Mm-hmm. So the shortcuts that AI can give you as an educator in your everyday life are absolutely amazing. Again, bearing in mind that you have to be really careful with sensitive student data, but there's so many things that it can do to make your life easier.
I think, I can relate to the idea of feeling overwhelmed at all the possibilities. I mean, it's evolving so quickly, and there's so much out there. I think something that you said again that stuck with me was what you said about that the way you use AI is going to look different depending on the subject, right? As you kind of think about how it's going to be used potentially in your stats class, when initially you thought, I don't know if this is possible, and as you kind of think about it and learn the tools maybe even more, you see how it can fit in with what you're already doing. And I think that is such a key thing to, instructors, faculty members are the experts on their subject, and you know your subject and what's going to work and what isn't in your course. So I think letting that kind of dictate where you move forward is an important point. If I say anything smart today, it's because Dr. Marion already said that. So, so thank you so much. It's a fascinating conversation. I think I also want to thank you for mentioning the AI website, fau.edu/AI. Please check it out. It's been a wonderful conversation. There are plenty more conversations to come, but thanks again so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome, and you will see me drop into one of your playgrounds on a
Please,
Friday.
yes, absolutely. Please do. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining today, guys.